For those of you who don't know, I worked in investment banking for 6 months from August of 2021, so after I graduated college, to the end of February of 2022, which means that around this time, it officially marks 2 years since I left behind that chapter of my life, which is surreal to say because anytime I reflect back on that period, that chapter, which to be honest isn't that often, I just like can't help but smile and also just like be amazed at how I mustered those 6 months. Like it feels like a fever dream. It feels like that wasn't my life, which in many ways it wasn't. But I thought to commemorate this milestone of mine, this to celebrate this, I would share some stories from those 6 months because I feel like I haven't seen many people really go in depth. They kind of talk about their experiences at a surface level or they give some pros and cons, but I feel like if you're interested in any sort of path, it's not about just having like, pros and cons or like I guess, the surface level experiences. Like, you need to feel like what it's like to experience it, to be there, to be in the slog, to experience the psychological just doubt and existential questioning. So I thought I would just sort of share some of those stories and, whether it's just for pure entertainment or if you're at all interested in investment banking, maybe this will give you an idea, more in-depth understanding. So I've got this list that I came up with this morning. I'm sure there's plenty of other stories that I don't remember, you know, but I thought I would at least share these. And to start, my first week, I mean, you don't really do anything because you don't know how to do anything. So you've got a lot of just empty time on your hands, which is a blessing because you're not going to really have that much going forward. And I guess maybe I was naive. This is my first job out of college. But I thought, I've got this downtime, not doing anything. Let me like do something productive with it instead of just like twiddling my thumbs and like switching tabs on my browser like everyone actually does. So I brought my iPad, and at the time, my ambitious self was studying for the GMAT for getting an MBA or whatever. And I was doing practice questions, taking notes during my downtime at the office. And on like the second day, I got this message from an associate, my staffer, who's like a rung above, I guess, on the ladder, basically saying like, "Oh, I heard you're studying for the GMAT." I was like, "Yeah, I am." She's like, "Oh, like, don't you think that's a bad look?" I was like, "I mean, I didn't know that, but I mean, I didn't go much further than that. I just said I didn't really know that." And she said, "Yeah, well, it is," and something just like sort of condescending or a little critical. But the thing is, I was based in New York, and she was in another state, but she heard about this through one of the three other people from my group at the office or something, and they confronted me about it. And just that initial experience, like that already just was like not a sign of great things to come because it instantly just put me on edge where I was like, wow, like I'm here with three other people, but I already can't fully trust them. I have to have my guard up and to live in that sort of space or to be in that environment, I mean, you can kind of see just how that bottles up over time and it leads to a lot of insecurity and fear and doubt and whatnot. And like, I guess the other interesting thing was like during my internship, this staffer was like, you know, so nice and kind and welcoming, which they do to try and hook you into staying And then once you're actually on the job, then they reveal their true colors. So that wasn't a great first impression or experience in my like first 2 weeks. And then I have another experience with an associate who I was working with. And for me it's like the most important thing in my life are the relationships I have with people. Whether you are family, friend, a coworker, or just someone I've met, I want to get to know you and really know you. I want to hear how you are. So I was asking this associate, it was just like us kind of, I guess, debriefing for a deal I just got put on with him, and I just asked him straight up. I was like, how are you in life? And he opened up to me. Again, like this associate who was years older than me, like a rung above me, was like opening up to me. And at one point in the conversation, because he has he was engaged, he's married now, I assume, but he was talking about his relationship and just not being able to really have time for his fiance or friends or anything. And I asked him, I was like, "What are your priorities in life?" And the first thing he said was, "My fiance would say work." And then he sort of took it back. He said he was like kidding or something, but you're not really kidding because if you utter those words, it means you've thought it before. That means that whether it's been explicitly stated, by the fiance, or you've thought it yourself, like you think to yourself, like I am prioritizing work over my fiance, over my partner in life, and that broke my heart to hear because he's a genuinely kind person that I mean he very explicitly stated he was like, yeah, I'm just doing this for the money, but I couldn't help but wonder like at what cost, right? At what cost? When is enough? Because you can keep accumulating and accumulating and all that, but what happens if the relationships that you have, especially with some of the most important people in your life, crumble away? Which so often happens in not just banking, but any sort of long hour or high stress profession. Oh, another one. We run this group call with oh god, like our entire group plus some like tangential ones. So there's probably 30 plus people in the call. This is during COVID, so we're all on Zoom. And at one point, the director, so managing director, he was working from home, so his like infant like was like, like fussing in the background, and at one point he had to like go pick him up. And our group had made a joke about, oh, like do we have like a future investment banker on our hands? And the managing director said, I wouldn't wish this dreadful life like on anyone. Straight up on a call with like 30 plus people, his coworkers and everything, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, did he really just say that? Like he really means that. I am working in this dreadful lifestyle that he wouldn't wish on anyone." I'm pretty sure on that same call, maybe a different one, this managing director essentially, or not managing director, our group head said something along the lines of like, just how can we make more money? Which, again, I know is the point of an investment bank to generate fees and all that. I know that's the point of public companies, like their bottom line and all that. But for me, that just to hear that uttered out loud, just it sat with me because it was like, okay, in the back of my mind, it's like I knew this was, what we were doing. We weren't saving the world or anything, even though I worked in like a renewable energy group. But to just have it just explicitly stated like that, so it's like, okay, we're here just to make money. And for me, as someone who just deeply values relationships, values how he shows up in the world for other people, that hurt my soul to hear. Yeah. Oh, this was unrelated. Like, this person wasn't in my group, but when you're networking for internships in the summer and you're reaching out to all these people at different banks and whatnot, you have like these connections, which, in business lingo or sense, they tell you like, oh, like, make sure you maintain them and like check in on them and all that, yada, yada, yada. So this person who I had networked with, she was at Goldman Sachs, the most prestigious investment bank in one of their most prestigious groups. This was like, oh my gosh, like what if I could like possibly like, weasel my way in there? And I think it was around Thanksgiving time or something, and we were catching up. And I was just like, again, I was asking her like these sort of questions about like, what her priorities are in life or how she is and all that. And she was telling me about how like, she was working on this huge deal, well-known company and all this stuff, like exposure, etc., on Thanksgiving Day at home with her family. And I forget what she said, in the in between, but at one point she said, "Hey, there's always leftovers. There's always leftovers." I mean, food is food, but that time, those moments with your family, your loved ones, especially when it's, when you're an adult and it's one of those like few times that you can all really gather and be together, and instead you're working because you're thinking about, progressing your career, getting this exposure, all of this stuff, your bonus, whatever. And it's like maybe you tell yourself like, okay, like one more, one more year and then I'll quit, or like one more bonus or one more whatever. But what if that isn't guaranteed, right? What if one of those family members or friends that you weren't really fully present with, what if they're not there? What if there are no leftovers in your relationships? Yeah. Oh, another one is, so one of my co-analysts who joined not long before I did, at one point during the time that we worked together, the 6 months I was there, he had a member of his family unexpectedly pass away, and he needed to, leave New York to attend the funeral and everything. And I was on this deal with him, and I remember this email came in where he listed like in hour blocks, like his schedule for the days. It's like his, time going to the airport, the flight time, driving to wherever. He literally listed the hours of the wake for his relative, and mentioned that he'd be available if needed. But that's what you do when you're an analyst, right? When you're a good analyst, is you're communicative. You let people know your schedule. You make yourself available if needed. But just the fact that you feel this pressure, this expectation to even like need to communicate it to this degree to make yourself available when you have a family member pass away, that was just insane to me. I don't even have words, really. Another one that I remember was, I mean, this happened a couple times, but and I hear about it all the time. But just like bringing your laptop to dinner, it's like it's a Friday night or a Saturday night, and you know, you hope that no one's gonna email you. You hope that no one's gonna ask you for something, but just in case you bring it, or maybe you've got like a Friday night deadline, and I'm like literally like hotspotting my laptop from the Uber and like finishing up these slides, or just like trying to make some progress on them so that I am not up until ungodly hours in the morning when I get back from dinner. But at least I got to attend dinner at all. And you have moments when, yeah, like a Friday night plan, you have like, plans to get dinner at 7 or 7:30, and you think you're fine, then it creeps up to that hour and you start getting emails and all that. And I remember just one time I just screamed, fuck, like fuck, 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 just over and over again, like literally just like pulling my hair out because I was so frustrated. Because it's one thing to hear about it, when you read online or hear about it from someone else, but it's another thing to actually experience it firsthand for yourself, not just once, but multiple times, to feel that utter lack of control over your life. That the flick of a switch, a simple email or message, your life can just get turned upside down just like that. And like other times where I was getting dinner with a mentor of mine, and literally at dinner in K-Town in New York, I remember just like sitting there and like putting my phone on the table, and like I could feel it. I had it on vibrate, but every time I felt it vibrate, I could feel this like jolt of like anxiety come up. And I was like, oh gosh, like what if I just got emailed or messaged or whatever? But I ignored it. I think I might have slipped my phone onto like the chair nearby so I wouldn't feel the vibration or anything. But just like that perpetual unease and angst over, that's again, something as simple as a vibration can just trigger you or set you off. And of course, when I left dinner and like walked back to my apartment, I looked at the messages and I was getting message, and I made up some lie about going to the gym. I was at dinner. Uh, I remember, I mean, I didn't see this until the next morning, but like getting emailed at like past midnight saying, I need this tonight. Is it tonight or is it today? Like this morning? I don't know. I had already gone back to sleep. I had already gone to sleep, excuse me, because at that point I was checked out. I was like, I don't really care. I'm just gonna start going to bed at like 10 or 11, which it's crazy that that even sounds reasonable because I go to bed at like 8:30 or 9 now. Um, I remember I had a friend who I made during like orientation who was in another group, and we made sure to just continue to stay in touch and support one another during our time, even though we were both busy and all that. And this was around the time that I was like I'd already sort of decided that I was quitting, or I was committed to quitting, and just like getting into this conversation about meaning and purpose and all that. And at one point, he brought up that he had gone to his doctor to just get a regular checkup, and his doctor like measured his blood pressure, and without even knowing my friend's occupation, he said, "You're up," because his blood pressure was high. He was saying your blood pressure is high due to like the stress of your job, and the doctor literally told him, he's like, you need to leave your job or something to just dramatically reduce your stress. And he didn't leave. The last time I checked, I mean, I haven't really been in contact with him much anymore. He was still there. But literally, your doctor telling you your physical health is being impacted by this job of yours. And at what cost? Or excuse me, for what? Because the cost is your physical health. But for what? For the career progression, for the exit opportunities, for the bonus or whatever. Because we think we're invincible when we're young, right? Look at us, we're fresh college grads. We're in our 20s or our 30s, like, we can take the long hours, we can take the stress, we can take the minimal sleep, we can take just like the anxiety and all that. But when you're young, you don't realize how this stuff compounds over time. Just as healthy habits compound, so do the unhealthy ones. And you see, like, it was so viscerally real to me what my life would look like and feel like if I stayed on this path. I just looked at like my associates, I looked at my VPs, my directors, my managing directors, and I could see just how my life would unfold in so many ways, physically, emotionally, my relationships, everything. Like physically, these people weren't taking care of themselves. Their bodies were, and you're sitting at a desk all day. You're not eating well because you're so stressed. You just order takeout all the time. You're not exercising because you're so tired. Mentally, they're stressed. I mean, I had a friend of mine who worked there. He told me about how one time he came across, one of our hires, really breaking down and crying in the office. You know, relationship-wise, I mentioned already, but I remember this friend of mine was talking to our group head, and the group head was telling him about how he like just missed so many dinners with his now grown adult daughters over the years. And for what? For the career, for the progression, for the money, like you don't realize what you've missed out on until it's too late oftentimes. And I remember, I mean, all these examples just paint the picture for me where I was like, I don't want to be any of these people. There's not a single one of them who I genuinely aspire to be like. And that's not a great sign, right? If the people that are, years ahead of you are not people that inspire you, are not people who have character or values or what have you that you resonate with. Yeah. Some other stories. Well, one is like there was like this internal group presentation that my friend and I were working on. But also, by the way, my friend is the absolute greatest thing that came from that job. Apart from like the realizations and experiences, I got to turn my life in a different direction and go in a different path. My friend, I love you. I'm so grateful for you. Those 6 months were worth it just for our friendship. But we were working on this project together over, I was about to say winter break, but you don't have winter break when you're an adult. And there was like this past presentation the year before, and there was no numbers to support the data of like a bar chart. And our associate just told us to make up the numbers, like literally just fudge the numbers so we could just like make the graphs like replicate the graphs from last year and just like make them look sort of correct. Like, literally just fudge the numbers. That was insane. Oh gosh. And then I guess like closer to the end, I mean, one that was particularly tough was Chinese New Year 2022, which I made some references to in a video from a while back, but if it isn't obvious, my family is from China, and Chinese New Year is an important holiday. It's not recognized as a national one in the U.S., unfortunately, which means I was working on that Tuesday, I believe, and like Google does the Google Doodle for like holidays, and it's so clear that it's Lunar New Year and all that. I remember just like joining the call, and we're there for a good while, and like no one was saying anything. I mean, again, I don't even think anyone knew I was Chinese because no one bothered to ask. But finally, the co-analyst, the one who, you know, emailed his schedule for the funeral he went to, he wished me a happy Chinese New Year, which meant the world to me. And then some other higher ups sort of like chime in, I guess, a bit. And then the associate who I mentioned at the very beginning, the one who asked me with the GMAT, she joined and like heard we were talking about Lunar New Year because or Chinese New Year, Lunar Chinese New Year, whatever. And I was sort of explaining to them like what sort of traditions or things I would be doing with my family, which I wasn't with because I was in New York. She said, like, oh my gosh, like, whenever I hear about Chinese New Year, I think of the song Eye of the Tiger. Because, yes, it was the year of the tiger, but she made that joke, which I don't think anyone laughed at, but without even acknowledging the Chinese person on the call. And then another associate who I worked with, working with on a deal. I mean, this is getting late at night at this point. And again, I'm in New York. It's my first, or one of my few Chinese New Years away from my family. My roommate, who was Chinese, had gone back home to his family. So I was in New York, alone, working all day, still working at night. I told my associate, I just messaged him, I was like, hey, it's Chinese New Year. I'm just going to take the night and just go celebrate with myself. I'd appreciate it if you don't, ask me unless you really need me. In fact, I had to say that too, unless you really need me. But as one would expect, most Chinese restaurants are closed on Chinese New Year. It's one of the few days, if not one of the only days, that, Chinese restaurant owners take off. So I was walking on the streets of Manhattan alone, just not having it, just really down. All these restaurants are closed, and at one point I'm able to find Xi'an Foods, like a chain that was open, and I remember just sitting there at the counter with an order of biang biang mian and zheran yarou, cumin lamb. Just sitting and eating that at the counter alone while all these other people were just like together and, enjoying the holiday. And what do you know, when I return to my apartment, I look at my phone, and the associate has messaged me for some pretty inconsequential stuff. Yep. I mean, some other ones, I guess this is really towards the end now. I mean, I would often just like stare. There was like a break room, and I would just stare out the window, just take a few minutes for myself, just stare. I mean, all I was looking at was other glass office buildings. Manhattan skyline in Midtown is nothing but that. But I would just like look out there. So I felt just so trapped, in this figurative but felt very real cage of mine. I felt trapped in my own life. Wow, that reminded me of another story I'll mention in a sec. But yeah, just like daydreaming about another life. I mean, even in the mornings when I would, get dressed in my business casual, white button up, blue button up. What's the option here? Navy slacks always. I would daydream about a different life, about being someone else, about living my dream as a YouTuber, daydreaming those thoughts while the warm water just hugged me. And for those few moments, everything felt okay. And then you get dressed, you walk to the office, and I remember during those last couple weeks leading up to when I quit, when I would get dressed to walk to the office, my clothes, they didn't feel like mine. I don't know how else to describe it to you. it was it's just this visceral feeling of these clothes are my body, but they're not mine. It felt like I was playing a video game. I was playing myself. I was picking out my outfits every day. I was going to, you know, the office and, completing all these tasks and leveling up these certain skills like Excel, PowerPoint, and, corporate talk and all that. And it wasn't my life because so much of what I spent my day to day doing, being, was just not who I am. Like I mentioned to you, just the entire, and when people ask me like, why did you quit and everything, which maybe I'll expand upon this in another video, but like it wasn't that the work was hard. The work is not difficult. It's not. Anyone can, anyone can figure out how to drag shapes in PowerPoint and do the modeling, whatever. Yes, I'm understanding to an extent, but I can. And it wasn't the hours themselves. They play a role, but it was the fact that the job just ate at my soul. The fact that I was literally in my own life, but I wasn't being who I am. And that eats at you more than the sleep, than the missed events with friends and family. Not honoring your soul. Who you are, right? Not honoring who you are. Yeah, I remember the last week or two, this is like leading up to like, we got like a, thank gosh, thank gosh, we got a 6-month bonus. Oh, such a blessing that I worked at a bank. Again, the stars aligned for me in that way, but yeah, we got a 6-month bonus, so we had a call with like my managing director or group head. He was like telling us the bonus and like, the pay raise and all that, and I mean, he was just really trying to seduce me with. He's like, wasn't like telling me anything about, like, wasn't saying anything about me. Just said like all like the fluffy stuff, like, oh, like heard you be doing a great job, all that stuff. And like most of his like pitch was just like the salary increase, like, you know, you stay like 5 years until this point, it's like you're making, $500,000 a year, and then it's like it just goes up and up. And I remember just sitting there and I was just like, but I felt nothing. Like it's just like you're just saying numbers to me. That's literally all they are, numbers. And after having already been through what I've been through the past 6 months, just having a higher number did nothing for me. And I'm privileged enough that I didn't have loans or anything to pay. So when I started working full time, it was like I had a fresh slate, which I'm very grateful to my parents for that. But it was like I was earning more than I needed, significantly more than I needed. And so I didn't even have the time or the energy to even enjoy it, to be fully present for when I could spend it. Like again, also, it's like I'm not a person who I didn't really value like flashy things or you know expensive night outs or anything. And it was like it just made no sense to me. It's like why would I continue enduring this just to have more than what I have now, which is already more than what I need. This isn't a story, but I mean, no one asked me how I am or how was I. Just like I'd asked that associate, no one asked me. Not my higher ups, not my group head on that call or anything. No one asked me, how are you? Like, how are you really doing? And everyone knows just how brutal of a job this is. The higher ups, most of them have been through the ladder and all that. They know what it's like to toil. They know what it's like to break down. They know what it's like to have that self-doubt and what the fuck am I doing? Or maybe they don't, so they're still there. No one asked. you know, how am I? I was the one asking as the junior employee. Phew. I wish maybe I'll add like a cut if I find this, but I wish I had this email that essentially a coworker of mine who I had a relationship with, it's like, and like he felt comfortable enough like sharing this email that he had been, I guess, like let in on by someone he had like a relationship with, basically from our group head to all of our directors, like just listing out all this stuff about how, well, he literally said that, our basically being like, oh, like don't overwork our junior staff, analysts and associates. Don't send them on fishing expeditions that will never see the light of day. Don't send them work like Friday night at 9 o'clock and expect it by Monday or something. All this stuff. And in the email, I remember he literally verbatim said, our junior staff is a precious resource. Literally called us a resource. What is a resource? A resource is something that is used. At that point, I was just like, I mean, it wasn't even, it was funny to me, but it was just like, oh my, like, it was like I was laughing at my own situation at that point. It's like, oh my gosh, like, this is really my life. This glorious life that I had heard so much about when I was in college and I was reading these internet forums and hearing the stories and just so keen on entering. And I was here and now I'm just like, holy shit, I can't believe this is my life. Some some last ones, but you know, after I got my after I got my bonus, I quit. Like we got our bonus on like a Friday, and that Sunday, Sunday afternoon, I sent an email. My friend had also already sent his, and again, I'm so grateful and appreciative, and I'll talk on some of like the more like pleasant memories and all that, but I'm so grateful for him. Like, we called, we Snapchat video called, and I was like typing my email, and like he was on there with me as I hit send, and yeah. But leading up to, like after I sent that email, it's like I had like a week, you know, before I was like officially done. I had food poisoning, which was so unfortunate, or not even food poisoning, just like a really bad stomach bug, which made it really rough. But fortunately, I wasn't really working. I was just like offloading everything. But I used that time to just talk to a lot of pretty much all of my associates, except for one about the GMAT. I talked to all my associates just on one-on-one calls and some other analysts, which I'll mention, and just like had heart to hearts. I was telling them, I was like, I'm not quitting. I'm not quitting to like go to another bank or to like advance my career. It's like I'm quitting because I have these dreams of mine to be a creative, start a YouTube channel, and me leaving is a step for me to go in that direction, to make more time and energy for this dream of mine. And I remember I was having one of these calls with one of my associates, and he really opened up to me. And mind you, so to give you context, this was a guy who, he was in the group, he was actually leaving the group when I was when I was interning the summer of 2020, during my internship, he was like leaving. And by the time I started full time, he had come back. So he left banking, worked for his family, came back to banking, came back to the group. And I was telling him about what my intentions were with leaving and all that, and he was just telling me about this. He was like telling me how he just like questions why he came back. He was questioning what he was doing with his life and how he wishes he could make the decisions that I was making. But he felt trapped because he had a wife a newborn, like a mortgage on a house and everything, all this responsibility that he felt was keeping him from doing something different, from being more true to himself. And I remember, like, from time to time, I mean, he hasn't texted me in a while, but when I started posting YouTube videos, he would shoot me a text now and then, just let me know he resonated with them, and to keep going, which I appreciate. And I don't know if you're watching this video, but if you are, I'm grateful for you. I appreciate you. My last sad story that I can remember is I had also reached out to one of the other analysts who quit. So, I mean, when I called my group head to tell him I was quit, like, before he said anything, he was like, "Are you quitting?" I was like, "How do you know?" He's like, "Because he already had like 2 other calls with my friend and this other analyst." And once I heard that, I was like, okay, like if he's quitting too, then he also maybe, there's something more to the story here. So I called him and we had this vulnerable conversation. And for all intents and purposes, myself, my friend, we thought this guy was like a hardo. Like he cared a lot about the job, was like super meticulous, was like, he was the one who would leave his status at like as going to grab food. Like, that level of detail and scrutiny. So we just thought he took this job really seriously and all that. He did, but we thought he was just like I guess like a career climber or whatever, and when I called him, it was like he told me about like all of that was just like a facade. How he was depressed, honestly, because he was in a city alone with no friends. He was, well, working this job that was just so demanding and taxing, but he didn't feel like he could tell anyone, or just really, again, like that feeling of like that snaky feeling of like I can't really be myself around anyone. I don't know who, like it's like a sign of weakness to like show like emotion and to be vulnerable, especially in this job. And he kept that up the entire time, literally until the very end when we actually called. And I was like, oh my gosh, like you're not this way at all. And it just like I'm thinking about that now, and it's just like how important it is to just ask someone, how are you? How are you really? You never know what someone is experiencing, what they're going through, how much they need or could use someone else to just genuinely care, to be a human and to show up for them. That gets lost in these sort of jobs. I'm gonna end with some more positive stories. Well, one is again this coworker of mine who was in the New York office. Like one of the first weeks I was on the job, I was printing and binding books, which is one of the menial tasks of an investment banking analyst. And I didn't ask, but he stayed after, like, to just help me finish up. That meant a lot to me. Like this dude, last time I checked, he's now an associate, but he has character, which I admired. I appreciated very much. Well, on lunar/Chinese New Year, honestly, the most positive part about that day was, so our group was spread out across different cities in the U.S. and there was this associate in California who I never talked to or spent time with, but just like recognizing her, well, her last name, and also I believe she has like her Chinese name and then like an English given name. I just emailed her and CC'd my friend who was Chinese, just like Happy Chinese New Year and all that, and like wrote it in Chinese, and she replied the same and wished us well, which was really touching. And I was also on a deal with where two of the, I guess the founders were Chinese, and I wish them well. And because again, it's like I feel like so much of it, it's like in these jobs, you just lose the humanity aspect of it, and at the end of the day, business is business, and I understand that we live in a society where capitalism exists and money is important, yes, but that doesn't mean it has to come at the cost of being human to one another. I had a friend from school who was also working in investment banking, and his and I's like office buildings were like right next to each other in Midtown. So one of the things I looked forward to when we were able to was just like taking walks together. We would just take like a quick, even if it was like 5 or 10 minutes, literally sometimes 5 minutes. We just take a quick walk around, the block, and just like check in with each other. And like I always appreciated, I looked forward to those. Like, 'cause again, it felt like as and I think that's the thing. It's like as brutal of a job as banking or any of these sort of like demanding career paths are. There is like a level of camaraderie, right? When you are going through the slog together, it feels like you are in the trenches together. And that's definitely what, bound me and my coworker friend together. If there's no one that shares that experience with me other than him, like that direct experience in our group and everything. But even having like other people that who are going through it, who can relate and understand what you're going through, because banking is a very, very, very unique situation or job to be in, I'll tell you that. It definitely makes you feel less alone. Yeah. Uh, so we get a meal stipend in banking where during the weekdays, y- my bank gave $30 that you can spend on dinner, like Ubers or whatever. And on weekends, if you work, you can also expense meals. So essentially, when I was working those 6 months in banking, I didn't spend any money on groceries because what I would do was I would, so there's this place called Dig In New York. I would sign up for like the membership, and I would use my credit card and just like buy meals with that to accumulate points and all that, and get like rewards and bonuses. But I also just like I would buy servings of chicken on the side, and I would just use that in my meal prep when I would cook. I'd also get sides of veggies too, so I would literally just buy extra components of meals, just like put them together. Sometimes I would also be able to like buy like two meals off like Uber Eats if there's like a 2 for 1 sort of deal. I would also there's like a Whole Foods right by Bryant Park. If you know, you know, on the way back to my apartment from the office. I would also just use my stipend to buy groceries, straight up. I would just buy groceries. Yeah. So I would just like stock up on like, frozen fruit, or I would buy a lot of ice cream. That's one thing I appreciate. I would just buy like a ton of like ice cream with my stipend. Like I would Uber Eats like, cheesecake, cheesecake and things like that. And like mind you, it's like I'd already stacked up like other meals for the week. So I was like, I'm just gonna buy some for like my roommate and I. Always appreciated those. It's a little bright. Uh, But yeah, my friend used it for parking. I kid you not. He would use his stipend to pay for parking. Yeah. And two last ones are, you know, I always looked forward to Saturday mornings when I was working in banking. So the most exciting time of the week for me is like after like the slog of the week on Saturday mornings, I would wake up at like a normal hour, like not have to like check my phone or like just not check my phone 'cause I didn't want to, didn't feel a need to. I like take my mornings slow, make breakfast, protein pancakes or something, and then I would go to the gym, go to the Blink Fitness right by Bryant Park. I actually enjoy my workout, not rush it, take my time, walk across the street to Bryant Park, and just journal. Just like one of these. I would journal, And every time I would start one of those entries Saturday morning, I'd be like, it's like something along the lines of like, gosh, so glad to be back. I've been looking forward to this all week. And I would just reflect about my days, my life. And the way I would describe it is like I was going through my own version of hell every single day. But the difference is between, I guess, myself and a lot of others is that I chose to relive it the following morning. So literally at my desk, at my cubicle, I would not compromise on this. I would journal at my desk before even touching any work. That was my boundary. One of them that I kept. And you go through hell and you go through it a second time, you learn a lot. You realize a lot. You burn through a lot of conditioning and things that you've held on to, that you've been attached to in terms of your beliefs and, you know, perspectives and all that. And the last thing I will say is, well, just going to the office that last Friday, even while I was ill, walked in like a hoodie and sweatpants, dumped my laptop and my monitors off. It's an empty office. I remember just like stepping out into the Midtown, and everything just felt more alive. The sun shined brighter, the air felt crisper, even the honks of traffic noise didn't bother me as much. But what I realized then is that, it's getting bright again. What I realized then is that for the first time in a long time, I was actually present with life. Because for so much of it, I was just autopiloting. I would wake up, hit autopilot, and just go through the day, go through the motions just to get through the day, just so I could go to bed where I was not living this life, this personal hell of mine. I was literally dissociated from my life, and maybe that's probably why I felt that video game-esque feeling, on my skin. Let me tell you, that Monday, the first Monday of March, which the day I'm recording this, is the first Monday of March, there was no more glorious feeling than waking up on Monday and not having to work in investment banking. Oh, I just remember my last story. Again, the GMAT associate of mine, I remember like as I was like going to the office to drop in my stuff, I saw like a message. I was like, oh, like you didn't tell our VP that you were leaving or something on our deal? And just not having to respond to her. I know it's kind of petty, but like not having to respond to her was because I just deleted everything after that. Greatest feeling. I mean, she also didn't even like, all she said was just like, you didn't check in with him? But yeah, just being able to like ghost her, great feeling. So those are my stories from working in investment banking for 6 months. Definitely not all of them, but yeah. Overall, could I do it again? No. But those 6 months were an experience I needed to have to get to this moment where I am today. So when I think about my life, and I tell my friends this often, but like if I had started out in a different spot, if I had started out in my day job, which was at WeWork, my 9 to 5, if I had started out at that job instead of banking, I don't think I would have been here now. Because that job was comfortable. On paper, it was great, truly. It was everything I was looking for in a day job at the time. But banking was just the extreme. And the way I describe it is like, imagine, this is kind of visceral but and morbid, but if you get put into a pot of water, if it's boiling, you notice immediately. it makes you instinctually want to jump out or to leave that situation. It's so hot, it's so painful. But if you stay in like a fairly warm pot of water, it's like it's comfortable or bearable, but it slowly cooks you until you don't even realize it. So, in that sense, my experience in banking, I'm so grateful for it. Would I do it again? No, but I needed to go through it to realize who I am. So, with that, if I remember any other stories, maybe I'll make another video. If you have questions about anything I said, or if you're interested in banking for whatever reason, let me know. Don't talk about it often, but I don't mind. So, till then, I appreciate you for listening. I'm grateful for you. Have a lovely rest of your day, especially if it's a Monday.